Ever since I was a kid, pilots have always been my heroes. I wanted to dogfight like John Wayne in the Flying Tigers. At first that involved toys and imagination, but later moved to video games. The first time I played combat, it was amazing. You could actually dogfight with your friends. The imagery was a bit basic, but you knew it was only going to get better. And the graphics have been improving ever since. Soon we had gauges and cockpits and three-dimensional flight, culminating now with the incredibly beautiful graphics you get in War Thunder and other modern flight games. And they look amazing, but we're still not there. It's still a screen. We don't feel it. We don't have it all around us. And to do that, we're going to need a bit more hardware. For a chair, I'm using the ejection seat out of an F-106 Delta Dart. The rudder pedals are Cytec's combat pedals with toe brakes. For the main flight controls, I'm using Max Flight's combat stick. But that isn't your only option. You can also choose, as my son likes to call it, a more skirt-friendly yoke. The yoke is made by Precision Flight Controls and is an absolutely amazing piece of hardware. I built a copper tube frame to support it all. The throttle, switch panels, and trim wheel are all made by Cytec. You can use a tablet with a browser to display the in-game map. The Max Flight stick shown here is by far the best stick I've ever used. It's a full-size stick with hydraulics, also has a collective, again mounted on copper tubing with a Cytec throttle quadrant. Butt kickers attached to both the control sets and the ejection seat provide feedback from the game. And last, but also most importantly, an Oculus Rift DK2. Another great advancement was TrackIR, which I'm using here. Using infrared LEDs, it is able to translate the motion of my head into changing of the view, and this works quite well, but I'm still looking through a window into that world I want to be in, and all around me, like my dog co-pilot here, are reminders that I'm not actually there, that I'm in my game room, in my house, watching all this happen on a television. Overcoming this last limitation is where head-mounted displays really shine. By simply plugging in an Oculus Rift, checking a box, and hitting play, I can enter that world. I can become the Duke. Similar to TrackIR, head-mounted displays use head tracking to translate the movement of your head into a changing of the view. But that is where the similarities end. By having you wear the screen and having it take up your entire field of view, in addition to splitting the image, one for each eye, you're left in a three-dimensional world that instantly updates with the position of your head, giving you the illusion of being here in this P-38 sitting on this grassy runway. It's all around me, it's all I can see, and everywhere I turn my head, I see exactly what I would see if I was sitting in a P-38 Lightning. Having a virtual body that mirrors the movements I make in the real world further sells the sense of presence that I am here in this aircraft. There is a small amount of lag in between my motions and the motions of the virtual body, but once you're in combat, it's hardly noticeable at all. Having a full-size three-dimensional cockpit and positional tracking lets you do incredibly cool things like stick your head out the window to start the engine, then close the canopy while being fearful of hitting your head. You can spend a lot of time admiring all the airplanes, but we'll move on. The graphics in War Thunder are second to none. The lighting, the detail on the ground, everything easily trumps any of the other flight simulators I've flown on in the Rift. It isn't photorealistic scenery, but it compares very well with footage shot from the air in real life. One of the amazing things about VR is impossible to show you on a video in YouTube is the sense of scale. These airplanes are full size, so are those ships on the ground. That's a view that even a 3D monitor can't accomplish. You may give them depth, but they're still small on a 20-inch screen. And low to the ground, the scenery gets very dense, which gives an excellent sensation of speed as it goes flying by under the airplane. And when you combine all the gear with the game, you end up with a truly immersive experience. Butt kicker shakes every time you fire the cannon. Tracers are flying past your head. When you score hits, debris and flames will go sailing by your cockpit canopy as the airplane breaks up above you and the crew bails out. All the while, you're craning your head around and fighting at the controls. It truly is an experience that you're really immersed in. One of the great features that War Thunder has in VR is its menu system. A number of games currently come up short on this, requiring you to either muddle your way through it with hard-to-see menus in the Rift, or remove the Rift every time you want to make a change and use the TV. What you're looking at here is actually output from the TV that's showing both. The double view is the Rift view, and then they do an overlay of the menus that look fine when you're not wearing the headset. If you view the menus inside the Rift, it's actually like being in an IMAX theater. They're huge, easy to read. You can edit all the options, change controls, start games, pretty much do everything without having to take it off, without having to strain your eyes. The graininess here is actually a result of the video capture software. The AI can be a bit random at times. I believe all 5 of them took each other out before I even got the engine started for this segment. The good news is they're a lot better at flying than they are at taxiing and taking off. All the years I was flying simulators, I always wondered, how realistic is this? How close is it to real life? I eventually went out and got my license, so I can tell you that it's actually fairly close. I'm not flying Spitfires, but the physics are all here. As we bring up the power, the torque from the engine will pull the nose of the aircraft off to the side. You compensate for this with rudder, but since we're not going very fast, the rudder doesn't have a whole lot of authority, so you need a lot of it, and possibly even some toe brake, a little differential to pull it back in line. As you pick up speed, the rudder gains authority, so you need a lot less input on it. And eventually, you'll be able to lift the tail with a little bit of input into the elevator. This will bring the nose down and also help with visibility. And then eventually, with enough airspeed, the airplane will fly itself right off the runway. When you first take off in an airplane, you get a really good sensation of your speed from all the ground whizzing by beneath you and in your peripheral vision. As you gain altitude, you lose that because it goes farther away and the sensation is lost. But as you approach the ceiling of clouds, you actually begin to get that sensation again, except this time from above. It's one of the nice little touches that you get from a head-mounted display that you don't get when playing on a monitor. Your entire world going inverted when you do a loop is another one. When you first start flying in VR, throwing the airplane around a lot can actually make you a bit nauseous. You have to sort of develop your VR legs. So long as you stop when you start to feel ill and do small sessions initially, you can usually overcome this within a day or 2 tops of playing. Flying in the clouds really shows off the immersion of virtual reality. You have no point of reference, no horizon. Everywhere you look is just gray, and your whole life depends on how well you can read those little instruments right in front of you. Just like in real life, you can't trust the sensations of your inner ear to give you any indication of which way is up. It's all gauges until you happily break through the clouds and get a visual point of reference again with the horizon. I recommend everybody try it to realize how truly hard it is to fly strictly by instruments in the clouds. In level flight, the Spitfire doesn't really seem to want to stall, so this time I'll get it really crossed up in a turn, and up, over she goes, and right into a spin. We'll hold these inputs for a second to really get it twirling, and then we'll see if we can recover. Pull the power back, rudder against the turn, and then push the stick forward. Eventually, we should stop spinning. There we go. Release the rudder, and recover from the dive. You lose a lot of altitude as well as make yourself very dizzy doing this, so I highly recommend you stay coordinated in your turns. Multiplayer on the Oculus Rift is an absolute blast. First off, yes, you will find yourself at a little bit of a disadvantage due to the lower resolution of the Rift. Things like spotting enemy aircraft or vehicles on the ground, or identifying friendlies, is more difficult as they're going to be a little bit harder to see. The good news is, in the last couple of updates, a few fixes have been put in place that help with some of these problems. The most important being the fixing of the marker dots, so once again aircraft are spottable at a distance much further away. Before, these were floating around randomly and didn't actually correlate to the position of another airplane. Now they work perfectly and you can spot an aircraft well off in the distance. Just like the in-game menus, you can now pull up the in-game map. It also shows up in that sort of IMAX style format, and you can manipulate it zooming in and out with the mouse. You can also access the chat window, but I'm not good enough a typist to do that with the Rift on. You can also select aircraft that don't have a cockpit, but you find yourself sort of a disembodied Superman flying through the air with no real points of reference for your orientation. For the game modes that allow it, you can also select the third-person view, but both of these views have a problem with about 3/4 of a second of lag in between your head motion and the screen updating, which will make you nauseous incredibly quickly. Even for as long as we've been playing this, most of us still flinch when we hit the ground. I use War Thunder in the Oculus Rift along with all this gear, both as a demonstration at flight museums and as an activity for seniors at a local nursing home. Over the years, over 400 or 500 people have flown on it, everything from small children to World War II pilots, and the response has always been very, very positive. There are more realistic simulators. DCS is a great one that comes to mind that I fly often. Flight Sim X also works with the hardware in the Oculus Rift. But if you're looking for a fun simulator that's realistic but not to the point where you're flipping every switch, that has good physics but not that it'll punish you for every little mistake, and you want hundreds of beautiful airplanes and dozens of amazing looking levels, and to participate in these massive online battles in all these historic locations, you just can't go wrong with War Thunder. It has good VR support, although not perfect, and there are some bugs that still need to be worked on, but as the consumer version of the Oculus Rift comes out and the final version of the SDK, there's no reason to believe these problems won't be solved, and the game, like it has in the past, will continue to get better.